Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, our disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support, such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. A couple of things to address before we dive into today's episode is first, the podcast reached a milestone last week, and that's over 5,000 downloads in the first 4 months of its existence. That's big. Not, Brene Brown or Oprah Winfrey big, but big nonetheless in the world of beginning podcast. And so I just want to thank each and every person who has listened, shared the podcast, rated and reviewed the podcast. I'm thankful and grateful for you. And thank you for helping be a part of spreading this word and this way of support for others who are in need. That's how we do it. It takes a village, and I'm grateful that you're a part of my village. Second, to my private coaching and mediation clients, a big, huge, super thank you. Thank you for your trust and confidence in me to help support you along your estrangement and or reconciliation journeys. Every day, I am honored and stand in awe of your courage and willingness to show up with vulnerability. That's what I call big, brave. And I am just so super honored and grateful for each and every one of you. And finally, a reminder that there is an online support group that I facilitate for estranged moms who identify as spiritual, who approach estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame or judgment, and who desire to do inner self-work and reflection. If that is of interest to you, we can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. As we begin today's episode, I have 4 quotes. The first, all great changes are preceded by chaos. Number 2, the secret to great change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. The third, when things change within you, things change around you. And number 4, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Anais Nin. So the title of today's episode is When All Hope is Lost, What to Do When Reconciliation is Not Possible. And I'd like to start off by saying, I understand that not every estrangement experience is going to end in reconciliation. That being said, I do believe that more reconciliation cases are possible if we are willing to do the work. And I understand that people resist doing the work to make that happen for a variety of reasons. And I am not here to judge you on if you've elected not to, if you can't, if you're not able to, what have you, to make those changes. I'm not here to judge that. I am simply here to say that I believe that it is possible to have more reconciliation cases than what we currently have. That being said, I'm also aware that there are cases when it is just not possible for a variety of reasons. Either it's a significant mental illness on the other person's part, or the other person's part of just downright refusal to entertain anything any different. And also parental alienation comes into play with a lot of things as well. So when we talk about losing hope and what to do when we believe that reconciliation can't happen, what do we do with our life? First and foremost, I want to tell you that because you are simply a human being on this planet, you have worth and value, and are worthy of a life of joy and purpose and things like that. So if I can't get you to remain hopeful for reconciliation on some level, I am hopeful that I can get you to a place where you can begin to enjoy life again. You can come out of isolation, you can come out of depression and anxiety, and live a life with meaning and purpose. And that takes work. So I guess, in essence, you've got to figure out what type of work you want to do, right? And sometimes I just want to put this out there too. Sometimes by default, when we quote unquote let go or let it be the way that it is, and we begin to turn our focus onto something else, almost by default, reconciliation can occur. So it's kind of like that. For those of you who may have had a parent who used to tell you when you would come home and you just have this big love crush for this cute guy at school, or you have this boyfriend and you're just all love crushed over him, and then the thing ends and you're like, I just want love in my life again. And your mom says, well, it'll come along when you stop giving it so much focus. Right? So sometimes reconciliation can come about kind of by default when we turn our attention onto other things. And so I want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind as well. So I think it's important to talk about what hope is, what can happen when you lose hope, and why hope is important. Hope, the definition of hope is it's a feeling of expectation and desire for certain things to happen. Right? And some of us would kind of warn others to be mindful of having expectations of anyone else other than ourselves. But I think hope is important. As a matter of fact, I think hope is so important that I had the word tattooed on my skin. And while there have been times when I have considered a tattoo inking over that to create something different, a different tattoo, I have never done that. And I've had that tattoo now for 15 years or so. And even in the midst of my estrangement experience, I did not cover that up. I left it to remain. So hope is pretty big in my world. I do also, let me back up a little bit. I want to also say that some people say, if you haven't been in estrangement and estranged for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, then you don't understand what it's like to be asking somebody to keep hope alive. And while my estrangement experience was not super long in the grand scheme of how long estrangements can last, it was an estrangement experience, and there was a time that I had lost hope. And I had to get myself to a place before I could see that flicker of hope, which I today I think remained with me, but I just couldn't see it. Before I could do that, I had to experience that loss of hope and get to a place where I was no longer willing to be there. I had to get to the place where I was like, I cannot move. I can't continue to live my life like this. I need to move forward with meaning and purpose, and I need to have joy in my life again. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And again, like I said, you've got to kind of choose your work and what you want to work on, right? So that being said, back to hope. I think that there's also a piece of hope if we are hoping for reconciliation. Depending on our perspective of that, we can be placing our inner power in the hands of someone else. So if you're waiting for the other person to change so that you can reconcile, if you're waiting for the other person to quote unquote get their shit together before we can reconcile, if you're waiting, you're going to be waiting. And you're going to be giving away your power every time you say that. Right? Take back your power. Have hope for yourself. Have hope for you that you will reconcile one day, not hope based off of the actions of someone else. So, and I will also say that I think it's really difficult for moms to quote unquote, let go, right? Most moms, by the time I hear them say, I've lost hope, they have fought the battles, they're bloody, and they've exhausted everything under the sun, and they have reached the end, right? And that's what hopelessness is, right? Hopelessness is reaching the end where you feel like there's no point in going on. And that's why hopelessness, it's so crucial to have hope in your life somewhere, somehow, some way. Because whether it's a physical death or the death of your soul, it's heartbreaking to me to hear estranged people talk about losing hope, because I see it in their eyes while they're physically there and present. On a soul level, they're not. And that you have to have soul to live and live a life of meaning and purpose. So anyway, we talk, so that's, to me, that's why hope is important, right? It's so super important for you to maintain that little flicker, even if it's just tucked away there in the back somewhere where other people can't see it, and it's not out and about, and it's not something you think about every flipping day of the year, and it's not something you talk about all the time, but just this little glimmer of a flame that is tucked within your heart somewhere. It's so super important for that to not be extinguished. So I would invite you to reconsider that, because in losing hope, before we get to the end of being completely and totally hopeless, right? It generally brings about depression and apathy, feeling angry, feeling helpless, feeling stressed and agitated. There's a sense of isolation and increased loneliness, and there's that reduced sense of purpose and meaning, right? And at the very end of that, the worst of the worst is an increased risk of suicidal ideation and suicide. And so it's super important to have hope. And again, your hope for you, right? And so in order to move beyond that, right? When people come to me and say that reconciliation is not possible, what do I do? How do I fix this? How do I get beyond this? The very first thing I say to them is you have to stop fighting reality. You have to acknowledge where you're at right here, right now, today. And that means acknowledging that you are in estrangement, that things don't look hopeful. And there's a difference in saying things don't look hopeful versus things aren't hopeful. Okay? That you're facing reality, you are in estrangement, things don't look hopeful right now, and that this sucks, right? You got to be able to say that. You got to have that acknowledged and witnessed by other people and validated for how you feel about that, right? And then you have to acknowledge that on some level, in remaining stuck on where you're at, is that you're trying to force something to be different, right? You're trying to force someone else to change so that you can be happy. You're trying to force someone else to come back into your life so that you can have meaning and purpose. You're trying to and it's that it just doesn't work. We can't change someone else. We can only change ourselves. So there's that fear of, what happens if they don't change? What happens if they, because in order to reconcile, they have to change. I'm inviting you to consider you changing. And then by default, along the way, oftentimes there is reconciliation. So acknowledge where you're at. Acknowledge that estrangement is trauma, and that trauma in and of itself changes the body, the nervous system, and it makes us react rather than respond to things. And it's exhausting to be in that place of always being reactive instead of responding. When you are reactive, you're giving power and control to someone else. And when you are responsive, you are taking back your own power. Okay. And I think one more thing that I'd like to invite you to consider is the difference between fear and intuition, because I hear oftentimes from estranged moms, well, I just have a gut feeling that, we'll never reconcile. And I invite you to reconsider that. I don't think that that's your intuition talking. Sometimes maybe it is, very rare in few cases, but oftentimes it's fear talking. And so I invite you to sit with that and, quiet, think about it. And as you're saying those things, and my gut tells me, we're not going to reconcile. I want you to think about what comes up, because oftentimes fear shows up as big emotions or some sort of big physical response. So crying, being super sad, feeling, heartbreak, like literally feeling the heartbreak, and things, being angry. Big emotions tend to come about through fear, where intuitive knowing is really just a calm sense of knowing, like of just knowing it is, whatever it is, just knowing without that super big emotional charge. So just, again, side note, food for thought. So we have to accept where we're at. And the big buzzword today is radical acceptance, right? Well, what is radical acceptance? People ask me that all the time. It's a commitment to the truth of experience as it is right now. And someone else can add in to that definition, and accepting whatever we find with genuine compassion, right? And that's why it's called radical acceptance. And I invite you, if you can't find compassion for the other person, for your estranged adult child or for your estranged parent, I invite you to find compassion for yourself, right? Because this is all coming back to us, coming back to you. And you can't change someone else, but you can change yourself. You can have compassion for yourself where you've never had it before. How would you talk to a friend who was going through this? Would you be shaking your finger at them and chastising them for all the things they did wrong and all the things they always get wrong and they can never get anything right? Of course not. Of course not. We would not talk to our friends that way. So why are we talking to ourselves that way? So try to find some compassion for yourself as you're going through this process, right? And sometimes that might mean just, a few seconds of self-compassion. But over time, with more practice, that builds and builds and builds and builds, right? But we can't, nothing changes if nothing changes. We have to start somewhere, and oftentimes that start is very, 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 very small. So, what do I suggest for people to do if they feel like there is no hope and that reconciliation is not possible? And to have a life of meaning and joy and purpose is, number one, consider therapy or coaching. I got myself into therapy. All of my big emotions were witnessed, seen, heard, and validated. And what does that mean? My therapist did not sit across from me and say, "You're right, Kreed, those kids are nothing but pieces of shit for treating you that way, and they deserve this, that, and the other thing, and you're right, you're 100% right, and they're just what brats they are." My therapist never talked like that. If you have a therapist talking like that, find somebody different. Because that's what your friends do. we're in echo chambers with our friends, right? Where we regurgitate back what the other person said, right? And that is not helpful. If trying to affect change, if you're wanting your life to change, if that's what you've always been doing, well, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. So you have to affect change. You have to do it differently. So my therapist instead said, I hear you, Kreed. I hear your broken heart. And I hear your pain. Your pain is valid. I see your tears. That has to be so painful. Again, she didn't say word one about my kids. She talked about me. What was going on with me. So that's what a therapist and a coach does. Is they can see, hear, and validate your experience. And once our big emotions are seen, heard, and validated, then the nervous system can calm down. And they're like, oh God, okay. I don't have to be out here screaming and shouting all the time now. I can just relax because, hey, I've just been heard and seen. Right? Think about a little kid. When you see a little kid and they're throwing a temper tantrum, and you go up to them and you know they've fallen and they scrape their knee, and you look at them and you say, wow, I know that's such a big hurt. That owie hurts so much. Generally, they stop crying. Might take a minute or two, but they stop crying and they look at you and they're like, yeah, it hurts so much. And you're like, I know. What can I do to help you? And they go, get a Band-Aid. And you go get a Band-Aid, you put it on, and then they're off they go, right? It's kind of the same thing with adults. We have to be seen and heard. All of our tears have to be witnessed, all of those things, and then we can move on. Friends are in echo chambers with us. That is not super helpful if you're looking to affect change. Just saying. The second thing I suggest is a gratitude practice. I did this for myself when my partner of 10 years left. And my best friend at the time said, I want you to write down 3 things you're grateful for every night. And I looked at her like she had 3 heads, and I insisted that there was absolutely nothing in my life that I was grateful for at that point in time. And she kept on me and on me and on me. And finally I was like, fine, if it will get her to just shut up, then I'll do this. And the first night I wrote 3 things on my gratitude list. I was grateful for my bed, my pillow, and my children. And that ended up turning into a daily practice, 365 days a year, that absolutely changed my life. Because I went from looking at all the things I didn't have and all the things that I was not grateful for, right? All the bad in my life, all the negative in my life, to purposely looking for things to put on my list every day. And what held me accountable to that is I put that on my social media, on my Facebook page. And so every day people would ask, if I didn't write a gratitude list, people would ask me, hey, I missed your gratitude list yesterday. What happened? Something along those lines. And so I kept it up because I was accountable to them. And I went about my day every day thinking, oh, I'm going to put that on my gratitude list. Oh, I'm going to put that on my gratitude list. Oh, I was grateful for the sun today. Oh, I was grateful I hit all the green lights on the way to work today. Oh, that kind of stuff. Right? And then it eventually got into bigger and bigger things. But eventually got to the place where I had to scale down my gratitude list because it was so big. Right? So I am a firm believer in a gratitude practice and being able to shift and change things. And again, it had to start small. And again, I did it out of, I'll show you thing. It wasn't, oh, I'm going to do this gratitude list and practice every day and it's going to change my life. That was not what it was. That's so not what it was. So again, you have to start somewhere. If you are grateful for nothing other than, your favorite beverage or your pet or your pillow or, this favorite bar of soap, whatever it is, write it down. And do that every day and begin to build your gratitude practice. Another thing I suggest is, getting in touch with your faith. If you are either religious or spiritual, if faith is important to you, if prayer is important to you, or getting out in nature is important to you, I suggest that, along with if you can do meditation. I'm not one that can sit on a cushion and meditate for hours on end. My brain doesn't shut off long enough to do that. But I consider my meditation practice my morning ritual when I'm getting ready for work or getting ready for my day. And I'm reflective. I'm trying to stay in the present. I'm trying not to be too far in the future and too far in the past. But, again, a kind of reflection of the gratitude list thing, right? Thinking of what I'm grateful for. So that can be a form of meditation. Also, rituals, I think, can also be helpful. And I am going to be doing something in May for the month of Mother's Day to help those of you who might be interested in being able to release some sadness and grief and things like that. And we're going to do a ritual. And so be looking for more to come on that later. And then be mindful of who you surround yourself with. Again, getting out of the echo chamber and surrounding yourself with people who will help you to see a different perspective, help you to reframe things, right? Help you to learn how to ask different questions and things like that. That is super, super helpful and important. I'm not telling you to leave all of your old friends who, focus solely on the negative things in life, but maybe limit your time around them during this time as you're trying to work and build towards finding meaning and purpose in your life again, right? I also encourage people to remember their past. Don't go back and unpack your bags and live there, but reflect back to the past and the times that you've had experiences that you have overcome, challenges and hardships and obstacles in your life. Because I'm here to tell you, you would not be where you are today without having overcome challenges and hardships and obstacles, because that's life. We all have them. And so the very fact that you're here today tells me you are a survivor. You have overcome things in your past. So you can overcome this. Okay? So remember things that you've overcome in the past. And, I also suggest, depending on where you're at in this process, maybe not at the very beginning, but as you move further along into the process, I also encourage people to look forward, right? Because when it seems like all else is lost, the future still remains. Tomorrow still comes, right? And so that means we get another chance to do it differently, to do it right, to do it, be creative, have it done differently. So there's a little bit of that. Just don't get too far off into the future where you start negating all the things and the progress you've made today. So I hope that these things can help you to gain a different perspective. What I think is just most important is to make a commitment to yourself, right? That you are going to do it different. You have to change what you've always done to get something different. And that can be something as small as changing how you do your daily routine. If you always drive, down Main Street and hang a left on Thompson Street to get to work, well, why don't you go a different route, right? Take a different road to get to work. Change things up. You will start to see different things in life. You will start to experience different things in life. And that is where hope can be reborn, right? That's where meaning and purpose can be found again. Oftentimes in the places we least expect them to be. And again, I just want to encourage you to please keep that little flicker of hope flame alive, tucked within your heart somewhere. And if you can only keep it alive and for yourself, then so be it. But try to keep it present. Okay? Because again, you are worthy of a life of purpose and meaning and joy. And you can have that even if your children are not in your life. You will always have the grief. You will always have the heartbreak. So stop telling yourself that you can't have this life of meaning and purpose if you always have heartbreak and always have grief. The two can live together, right? Talk to anyone who has lost someone to death, who has lost someone who has died. They will tell you that grief never goes away. It always remains, but they have to learn to move forward with their life. And that's what I'm asking you to consider, is learning how to hold space for those two things that seem like opposites, right? And if you need help with that and would like to consider coaching with me, I can help you to find that pathway forward. Just reach out, let me know, okay? So this brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent and that you're able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey wherever you may be on your estrangement or reconciliation path. If you feel you have received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing the podcast with others, and perhaps leaving us a positive review. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, or anonymously or not, please reach out via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Until next time.